Let me tell you a bit about Daniel. Daniel is the founder and CEO of Construction Industry Resources. The company provides market intelligence and project risk mitigation technology and solutions for large global owner and contractor companies building major construction projects. Daniel is also Director of Operations and a workforce consultant for the Construction Users Roundtable, CURT, an international organization of national and global companies representing nearly $200 billion in annual construction spending. Daniel is a leading voice for our industry and for the cause of meaningful workforce development. And he travels and speaks numerous times each year at events all around the United States. Please help me welcome Daniel Groves, Construction Industry Resources.
Thank you, Glenn. Good morning. In 2011, one of the leading, as we were still exiting a recession, one of the leading and the top issue, domestic policy issue in the U.S. was considered to be jobs. And now, about 7 years later, that really hasn't changed. It's still jobs. And why is that? Well, for one thing, Americans want jobs. They want jobs that give them the hope and the promise of a better future and good salary. They want jobs that can triumph over the economic forces that can move so quickly around the globe with a few computer keystrokes. Manufacturing, as we've heard today, offers those kinds of opportunities, whether it's on the construction side or whether it's on the facility side and permanent career employment. Construction offers those opportunities, and they're very, very meaningful, as we've already heard, and I won't go into detail about that because the opening video outlined that so well. So as Glenn has already mentioned, the SSACA has studied this extensively and attempted to validate this opportunity, and we put that into this report that we're offering today. And so I'm going to hit some highlights on that. I'm going to do it quickly. We're going to cover a lot of territory over the next few minutes, and then you can stop by the booth and pick up that report, all right? So let's get started. First of all, let me just say this. Opportunity is not dead. When we look around the United States, we see a tremendous amount of economic activity. In fact, when you look at the entire economy, we're in the third largest expansion period in more than 100 years. At the beginning of the next year, it will be, if everything continues as it is, we'll be in the second longest. That's driving a tremendous amount of construction spending. And so when we look around the country, we're seeing all this construction spending. It's driving a tremendous amount of demand for skilled labor. Here's the challenge. There aren't enough skilled workers to do all those jobs. When we look at just the Southeast, a 13-state region, it represents about 50% of the industrial spending in the U.S. And then when we look at the 6 states that were just for this coalition, just for this report, we can see a tremendous amount of spending that's taking place already. The orange line at the bottom represents about 20% of the spending. That's the automotive industry. Now, this doesn't even take into account the big $1.5 to $2 billion Toyota Mazda facility that may or may not be located within those 6 states. It also doesn't take into account infrastructure spending. If the president's infrastructure plan moves forward, it represents hundreds of thousands of new jobs, maybe even as many as 1 million, depending on how much spending takes place. So all of this isn't even considered in these projections just yet because we just don't know. And so all of this is driving a tremendous amount of demand for skilled labor. And so what we're seeing here reflects the need for workers like millwrights, machinists, instrumentation techs, engineers, electricians, and so on. Those are the workers that are needed to build these plants. And you might say, well, that doesn't matter to me because I'm not building a plant. Well, then you're maintaining one, right? And so you're competing for the same labor. And as you can see on the orange line, there's already an insufficient supply of that skilled labor. And more importantly, it's on a decline. That's because we're not bringing in workers fast enough to replace those who are exiting the marketplace. So we have a negative growth rate year over year. The issue is not enough bodies. The issue is the skills, and that's where we have the challenge. The CLMA projects that we'll have, over the next 5 or so years, a shortage of about 1.5 million skilled craft workers. The American Welding Society says over the next similar period of time, there'll be a shortage of about 350,000 welders. So the challenge is very real. So let's explore that for just a little bit. Let's assume we bring a new worker into the workforce today or next year. It will take about 3 years or so, 4 years maybe, to get that worker minimally competent on the job in a skilled position. It will take another 3 to 5 years for them to be competent, productive, and experienced. Meanwhile, over the next couple years, we are expecting to see, based on actual birth dates, not trend lines, actual birth dates and expected retirements, we're expected to see about a 14% attrition through retirements. Over the next 5 years, it's about 16%. Over the next 10 years, it's about 27%. In 2029, we lose the last of our baby boomer generation. And by 2030, we've lost nearly 40% of our workforce today. Are we bringing in enough workers today? Remember I said we have a negative growth rate that we're experiencing. Are we bringing in enough workers today in order to replace those and get workers up to speed and seasoned enough to replace those who are leaving? And I would say no. This is a big challenge. We've done a tremendous amount of research that validates empirically that the more severe the labor shortage you're experiencing, the more impact it has on projects. And so when you look across the country, and we look extensively and review this on a very regular basis, we see that the majority of folks say they're in a moderate to severe shortage environment. Well, that means about a 17% increase on average in cost, about a 23% increase on average for schedule, and a tremendous amount of increase in safety challenges. Now, this is a big problem because while we can mitigate cost and schedule, I would say there's no one in this room who's willing to try to mitigate and put up with more safety incidents. The challenge we have is that if you experience one, you experience all. So what is it that we need to be doing in order to address this challenge? There are many things, but I'm just going to address 5 of them here in very short and very quick order. Number 1 is effective workforce growth. One of the key things that we need to do, because a lot of effort has been going into trying to recruit and train and get people in and change the image of the industry, but one of the key things we need to do is reintroduce work as honorable, right? That it's the key to success and survival, actually. But how are we going to do that? We have 4.4% unemployment. We have 4.7% just in the construction marketplace. So where are the workers going to come from? Well, consider this. 72% of the states are paying more in welfare benefits than the minimum wage. 32 to 35% of the states are paying more than $15 an hour, which, as you know, is where many are advocating we move the federal minimum wage. So where are we going to get these workers from? Secondly, we need to get owners to engage with contractors and get them to contractually require workforce development. This is a big opportunity, and it's one that's widely accepted. Productivity improvement. This is another key where the construction industry can really learn from the automotive industry. We've only seen about a 1% increase in productivity. But if we were to introduce lean principles in the construction space, we would see about a 30% improvement in schedule and a 15% improvement on cost. And yet it isn't being done. Early project planning. What if we were to engage contractors much earlier in the planning process? We could get better input on understanding labor risk, understand constructability. We could do so much to improve that process. Optimizing design and processes, not just prefab and modular, which is typically what we think of, but what if we were to design projects and facilities so that they required fewer workers to maintain and keep up? And then last is embracing technology and data. The fact is, we're awash in data. We use it from trying to choose the right people for baseball teams, for selling and marketing and all kinds of things. But the fact is we don't use it in the construction industry, and there's a tremendous opportunity here. So let me just close with this. Why should you care about any of this? Number 1 is cost. This is a big one. The facilities, the asset that you are managing is of paramount importance to you. You might say, well, the construction part of that belongs to the contractor. That's why I hired them. Yes, that's true. But as the owner, you are responsible for shareholder value. And so I would say it's so important that you take the responsibility for helping make sure these things happen we've been talking about. Economic growth. If we don't have workers, we don't have jobs or projects. This impacts our economy in a major way, as you well know. When projects are moved to the right or canceled, it's hurtful. We have so many folks who are exiting colleges with a tremendous amount of debt and little employability with their degrees. And so there's tremendous opportunity in the construction industry and the automotive industry that we should be introducing to them. Our issue is not really unemployment. It's economic growth that's stifled by a weak workforce. Then the last thing I would just say is leadership. The reality of it is, from my perspective at least, workforce development challenge is primarily about leadership, and I think that's where you have the opportunity to step up and really do something to help and make a big difference. So thank you very much for your time. We hope you stop by the booth and pick up a copy of this report. We think you'll be very pleased with the results.